Welcome in to another edition of the James Boyd Podcast. I am James Boyd, joined by my editor and co-host, Jim Aiello. Jim, what a week. It's not over yet. NFL Combine's not over yet, but I have been put through the ringer, my friend.
Yeah, I know, man. You've been running ragged, and with the radio show now, everybody can hear James on the fan every morning. That's awesome. Very cool, though. You listen to this podcast still. You gotta get his,
Exactly. I got to
the
come
hottest
home,
takes are
man.
here.
I got to come home. I got to come home.
No, I said it was awesome. I love being back in Indy and hanging out with you and seeing everybody. It was a good time. But yeah, and then the Colts, as Chris Ballard does, I think he doesn't. I think you listen to some GMs or some coaches at the combine, and it's just like, ugh, they just said nothing for 10, 15, 20 minutes. Chris Ballard didn't obviously give away what his plans were for the offseason, but I think he always does a pretty good job of being honest and leaving breadcrumbs at the very least. And as you wrote, I think in your latest story, like hinting, at what some of the significant moves might look like. So I know you wanted to start there, but I wanted to kind of ask you what your top takeaway was from the Chris Ballard press conference, which I have to imagine is what he said about Anthony Richardson.
Absolutely. And just for context, when Jim says he's happy to be here, obviously covered the Colts in the past. I
Yeah.
don't see him very often. That's one of the questions I get every now and then is like, I see Jim probably once or twice a year. So when he comes, it's like, all right, like my editor is actually a real person. He's not AI, which is awesome. So that's cool. It was good to, see my friend and obviously my editor in person and kind of hang out. We had our summit and see some other familiar faces as well. And then Jim got on the road back to Chicago. But to your point, the fireworks sort of happened Tuesday night when we spoke to Chris Ballard and I asked him point blank, when we talked about competition, will this be an open competition? And he said yes. And so after that meeting at the podium, I guess, in the Indiana Convention Center, they took us, the local media, off to the side again, which most teams tend to do, give their local media a little more, a meat off the bone. Stephen Holder of ESPN really like pushed him on this, say, hey, just to make sure we're all clear here, do you mean someone could come in and theoretically win the job
Yep.
away from Anthony Richardson? He said, yes, that's exactly what I mean. And so I'm paraphrasing a little bit there, but he's made it very clear that this will be a true open competition, at least so they say. But I think that was my biggest takeaway because, I mean, we'll get into it a little bit more, but my initial thought, Jim, is that this is a message to Anthony more than it is to the other quarterback that could be brought in, whether it's via the draft or via free agency. Trade does not seem like a realistic option. I kind of poked around with that on the fan with Chris Ballard. He didn't really want to play ball there. Left the door ever so slightly open as most GMs would, but it seems like draft or free agency, and honestly, free agency, because the emphasis that Chris Ballard put on this when we talked about open competition, he said production. And
Yep.
that stood out to me because I was thinking, okay, that might mean production in the NFL, like experience, just having done the job before. And so that was my takeaway, Jim, is like, okay, this is for Anthony. This is to light a fire under him and to let him know, not necessarily about this upcoming season, whether or not you're going to be QB1, because I do think he'll start week one, whoever,
Sure.
no matter who they bring in. However, this is your make or break year. You got to take it serious.
It's a reaction. I totally agree. I think it's a reaction to what happened last year, and it should be. Anthony Richardson has not earned the benefit of the doubt. And again, I'll say this for the hundredth time on this podcast. I am in the Anthony Richardson corner. I still believe in him. I still think the Colts believe in him. I still think there's a lot there for him to, he could become a franchise quarterback for the Colts. However, he hasn't proven that. He hasn't proven he can stay healthy. He hasn't proven that he can be a competitive quarterback consistently. And he hasn't proven he can be a leader in the locker room or outside of it. Like none of those things he has proven through 2 years. So you lose the right to become the assumed starter, which I think is what you wrote in your story, which is he's not the start. I mean, he's the starter because he's the only guy on the roster now effectively. But as soon as they bring somebody in, it's a competition, which is good. He needs to be pushed and understand that the NFL is, like we've talked about, is not given. It's not, you don't just get to be drafted based on athletic talent and you just be a superstar franchise quarterback. You have to push and push and push and push. And again, from what Chris Ballard said, he's down in Florida. He's working with the guys, his quarterback coaches, and trying to get better. This is the first real offseason he's had to do that. Last year, he couldn't do that when he was recovering from surgery, as you've written about many times. But so I'm confident that it's the right decision. Or I'm confident that, I'm sorry, that he will learn from his mistakes. But unless he does, then they have to have a backup option. I think Chris Ballard said it during his season end press conference. Like, we can't trust him necessarily to be the guy, and we can't trust him to stay healthy. So we have to bring somebody else in. Now, to your point, I am curious as to how real you think this competition will be. And I know we don't know until we know who the veteran is that they bring in.
Absolutely. I'll say when we were talking about this topic and others on the fan, Chris Ballard called me passive aggressive, and I was like, okay, well, I'll be aggressive then. And for those listening, it's just a jab. I enjoy it. I throw one back. We have some mutual respect there for sure, so I don't mind that at all. But Jim, in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, just to be blunt, how do you sell this to the other guys?
Yes.
Like that's my biggest thing. Like I understand where you want Anthony to kind of feel this message,
Yep.
but how do you sell this to a Daniel Jones? How do you sell this to a Justin Fields or Jameis Winston or whoever they might consider to bring in? How do you sell that? And he said, no one's, I'm paraphrasing, no one's really going to believe me until I just go out there and do it. And also it's going to depend on the guy. I thought that was interesting because, again, if you're Justin Fields and you're 25 and you've had some success in the NFL, I'm not saying he's like, this great quarterback. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in the free agency market. But he's had more success, obviously, than Anthony Richardson. He's still young. There's some upside there. Daniel Jones, I believe, is 27, still pretty young, some dual threat capabilities similar to Anthony's. Why would these guys come here if they really can't win the job? And so to me, I think that kind of taints whatever pool you might be trying to go after. And I'm very, very curious to see if I'm wrong on that, because it's in my mind, I'm like, if I'm looking at the situation and you're telling me one of two things, if I'm the other quarterback, I have a chance to come in and win the starting job legitimately, then yes, I'll probably consider Indianapolis because there's not many options like that. But two, I can't come in and we're splitting reps and we're even, and then I pull away and you still give it to the other guy, which in my mind, I just don't see how you bench Anthony and don't start him another game. That's it sounds dramatic, but to me, Jim, that's the essence of what we're talking about. Open competition before the season even begins, obviously, means that you're saying there's a world where Anthony Richardson, the number 4 pick from 2 years ago, would not start another game for you, in theory.
Yeah.
That, to me, is just not realistic. And so the options out there aren't always that great. I understand that. But the thing that I have been fighting, and I think we kind of align on this, Jim, what is your response to the people who often, you edit my stories, you see some of the comments and share you often share your own thoughts on Twitter, and I weigh in as well. The people who say, oh, Daniel Jones isn't real competition. Justin Fields isn't real competition. What's your response to that when the competition, in theory, for those guys is Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, so there's two thoughts to that. One is there aren't like better options out there that are within the Colts price range. I mean, if you guys are seeing the trade stuff with Matthew Stafford, which to be clear, like Chris Ballard passed on the chance to trade for Matthew Stafford years ago, so he's not going to do it now when he's 37 years old and it's going to cost like $50 million a year. There's the Sam Darnold thing where you're pretty sure he's going to make $40 million a year. So unless you want that to pretty much be the Colts offseason, that's not going to happen. So then you have to go down a tier and you have to look at and see what guys are available and who can actually offer competition. But like you said, Daniel Jones no one's thrilled about Daniel Jones. No one's thrilled about Justin Fields. But I think your point in this whole time, and I agree, has been if Anthony Richardson can't beat those guys out, then it's over. Then like if he can't win a competition with Daniel Jones and Justin Fields, then he's not your franchise quarterback. So again, beating them, I would say, in the quarterback competition probably doesn't tell you he is your franchise quarterback, but it's a good first step. I mean, you have to be able to do that. Yeah, and you've talked about it before. Like the Daniel Jones hate. I get it. He was top 10 pick, and he probably shouldn't have been. And he plays in New York, and he's a kind of a weird guy who's very quiet. So people don't like him. I fine, but like he's won a playoff game. He's had a good season before. He's proven he can run a very productive offense, which he did a couple of years ago. Obviously, last year didn't go very well. Didn't have a great offensive line in front of him. Finally had a weapon in Malik Neighbors, and that was starting to connect a little bit. He had like a couple game run there where he was looking pretty good. I don't know. I think Daniel Jones can be a solid NFL quarterback in the right place, in the right system, with the right coaching and weapons around him. So If they brought in somebody like him, yeah, I kind of think that would be interesting competition for Anthony Richardson, who he needs to beat. He just has to win. Otherwise, it's just over for him in Indianapolis.
Again, and my thing is, people are like, oh, it's not real competition. Yes, it is. When the quarterback play that Anthony Richardson has put on display has been as poor as it's been, that matters. And so I think that that is the factor that we're kind of missing. Like, I understand that it can be frustrating for some people to say, man, why in the world would that be real competition? But you got to look at who's there.
Yeah.
Anthony has had some incredible moments. The Jets game, the drive against the Patriots,
Yep.
even his first season, like that first Houston game before he got concussed, he was balling. But you look at the totality of his games, he's 8-7. I believe he's got 21 total touchdowns and something
Yeah.
like maybe like, I know he's up there as far as turnovers as well. Really, this past season, the completion percentage from last year was 44.7%. So, league low, franchise worst. Those things show you that he hasn't had a lot of success. And the guys who we're talking about possibly coming in here competing against him have had success to some degree. I'm not saying Justin Fields is, a franchise quarterback, but he's had moments, more of them, and he's shown flashes more of them than Anthony. Obviously, Daniel Jones won a playoff game, got paid, got a huge contract. You know, I mean, one of the reasons he got paid is because a couple years ago he put 4 touchdowns on the Colts and they clinched the playoff berth. I was there to see that, and that was what it was. And so I just think that outside of, and then the other side of it too is like Sam Darnold, he's going to cost.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers, in theory, would
No.
probably win the job, even though I wouldn't. Just in a vacuum, I mean, I wouldn't
It's
sign
not
him
a
because he's
Chris Bell.
old.
Yeah, it's not a Chris Ballard guy either. There's no
Yeah,
way.
no way. But again, just quarterback for quarterback, he'd win that
Yeah.
job, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone talked about how bad he was last year with the Jets, 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Anthony Richardson did that. People be losing their
Yeah.
minds.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just what it is. And so I'm not saying you have to pull the plug. I'm just saying whoever they bring in is worth it because the quarterback play has to be risen by so much. Which leads me to this, Jim. Throughout Ballard's news conference, one of the
Yeah.
things he hit on was I really trust his agent, the people around him, and his private coaches.
Yep.
And one change to that private, coach is Chris Hess.
Right.
The guy who worked with Josh Allen, and then shout out to my guy Cameron Wolf from NFL Network. He reported that Josh Allen and Anthony Richardson are going to work together with Chris Hess, I assume, down there in Florida or wherever this offseason. And that is huge to me, Jim. Like, first of all,
Yeah.
shout out to Josh for even being willing to do that.
I was
But
gonna say, did they
two,
pay him or what is the like?
it sounds
what's
like
the incentive there?
I've
Yeah.
asked about this to a few people. It sounds like he's just a very nice person.
I love it.
And I was like, oh, so like that's why you won MVP. Okay, respect. Most
Yeah,
valuable
I
player
mean,
for like not only you and the Colts as well, right? Bills and Colts. But I think getting with the one guy who, shout out to Joel A. Erickson from Indy Star
yeah.
because he's hilarious. He always says you're asking Anthony to do what one other quarterback has done like ever. It's very, very simple, right? But Josh Allen is that one guy where like, the completion percentage wasn't that great. Accuracy wasn't always that great
Yeah.
in college. And then post college where it rarely ever gets any better, he was able to kind of refine himself and get to the point where, again, he's league MVP. So what do you think about that part of it? Anthony working with Josh Allen and, honing in and trying to become that Superman that we expect or come to see from Josh Allen.
I have an interesting question about all of this at the end, but I'm going to save it for. I love it for Anthony Richardson, and I really did like the way Chris Ballard phrased it was that he has people around him we trust. He didn't say these guys are going to like rave about Anthony Richardson all the time, or that they've told me he's doing great. They trust him. So if he's not putting in the work, they'll know. They will find out. I mean, obviously the agent probably won't say anything, but the quarterback coaches might just be like, yeah, the steps weren't, quite where we needed them to be, or you're really going to have to work with them when you get them back because it didn't, we didn't click the way we'd wanted it to be. So I did like the idea that Chris Ballard at least set up the concept that I can trust their evaluations, good or bad. I think that meant, he can trust them if that's what, going forward for them. Josh Allen too, by the way, I mean, as much as I love Joel, my former B partner, they don't need to become Josh Allen. Like, let's not confuse the two things. Yes, they needed him to become more accurate, but like, and what he did, he's gone from 52%, I'm looking at it now, 53% essentially his rookie year, to just about 69% his third season. No one's asking Anthony Richardson to be that. Like, that's a big leap. 60% would be great. Anything 60, 61 would be outstanding. And I think we saw from Anthony Richardson in his rookie year, he's capable of that. Like, he was close to 60% there. I do think there are things that this is not a team that runs a lot of screens. This is not a team that throws a lot of things behind the line of scrimmage in general. I do think that they can do a little bit more of that if they really want to boost the completion percentage. They have some guys who, we've talked about this with the Tyler Warren thing. Like, if they want some guys who can help create after the catch and help his, boost up his accuracy. Like, you go look at like Bo Nix. Oh my God, he had a great rookie year. I think it was something like between 30 and 35% of his passes were behind the line of scrimmage. So it helps to have a coach who will do that for you if that's the thing you're focused on. And maybe Shane Steichen should be more focused on that, which is to build his confidence, get him some short throws, and make him get that completion percentage up. But to your question, or actually, I want to get to my question. Do you think, and I heard this from a national outlet who I won't cite just because it was more, I'm not even really calling them out. It's more of just they're bringing it up as like a wildest dreams scenario.
Okay, I'm here.
If the reports back aren't great from the quarterback coaches,
Okay.
do you think there's any chance they just call it this offseason and just either try to move on, cash out? Again, not saying to get a first round pick or even a second round pick for Anthony Richardson at this point, but like, would you ever see that as a possibility if they were like, you know what, we missed on the character stuff, the physical talent isn't enough to overcome some of the other stuff, the lack of experience and reps that he's had. I was wondering, I guess the real question I have for you is the way you were there for Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen talking.
Yeah.
Did you get the impression that they're happy with the way things are going now, or did you get the impression that I don't know that they're only half committed to this experiment? I guess at this point, I don't know. What was your impression of the way they were talking about Anthony Richardson?
I like this question. This is kind of what Jake Query asked me the other day on his show, where like, do you think? I think it's what you're kind of getting. Like, do you think they've given themselves an out?
Yeah,
By saying it's an open competition. Like, okay, well, we said it might not work, so give us another shot at quarterback next year and keep us all around.
yeah,
I would tend to somewhat agree because you didn't really have to announce that now.
no, they don't have to say that now. They shouldn't if they're going to try to trade him or anything. Yeah,
Exactly. And that was the part that was a little bit alarming to me. I didn't expect, I mean, that's why you probably asked the question. I didn't expect Chris Ballard to say, "Oh, it's an open competition." I thought he was going to say, "Hey, we're here to, Anthony's QB1, and he's going to put like whatever." So I think there's a real possibility where that could happen, but at some point, and I know Chris Ballard kind of broke down why he got a ninth year. Kevin Bowen
yeah,
asked him that the other day. I thought that was a fantastic question, and he, for the first time, kind of revealed like, "Hey, after Reich got fired, I sat down with Jim Irsay. We laid out our plan, and he told me he would give me time to fix it. Give me time to do what I got to do to turn the program or turn the franchise around." And it
right.
seems like that timeline explains why he didn't feel or never acted like at least that he was on the hot seat last year. Now that could change this year or the year after, but like people keep asking, why is he in year 9? Why is he getting a third year with this quarterback and this kind of regime? It's
Yeah,
because it seems like Jim Irsay kind of was okay with that. And the word that Ballard said that Irsay told him was patience.
yeah,
I'm going to be patient. And so, again, I could see that scenario where, getting back to your point, Jim, they move on. I just think that it's so. At that point, I don't see how you all will be allowed to come back as a regime other than Jim Irsay liking you. And I mean that sincerely because you cannot tell me you vetted him because then it's an indictment on your scouting process.
100%.
Like,
Yep.
how did you not vet the character stuff? How did you not vet the hard work stuff? I'm not a rumor guy by any means. When you talk to people that have been at Florida or been around the Florida program when Anthony Richardson was there, the impression was like, yeah, he does kind of have to mature. He loves the game of football, but he does have to work harder. He
Yeah,
does have to learn how to be a leader. And so all those things, it's like, and the most damning thing that I put in the story is that you had to be told you had to work harder. Like that's a hard thing, I think, to kind of square. And then
yeah,
also get better as a player. Like you got to get better as a leader. as a commitment, to the game. And then on top of that, hey, lead us to the playoffs. So there's a lot riding on that, but I still, stand by the statement of they're going to play him because you've married so much to him. Like you kind of go down with the ship if it goes down, and obviously, who knows? He could have a great season and bounce back, and that would be a hell of a performance. And obviously, everyone
Yeah,
in Colts land will be happy. I think Plan A is still Anthony Richardson,
me too.
but I hear you on like there is a little. It seems like a little Plan B is kind of like peeking his head around the corner, like hey, just in case we kind of told you what was happening. So, very curious position for sure, and we'll know more obviously when we get through free agency, get through the draft, because that'll tell us who exactly is competing against Anthony. Because one of the wildest things that I had happen to me, Jim, was went out to dinner with some friends. The two main questions I got, and this is just from people around the league, whether it's agents, whether it's coaches I know from different places, whether it's my fellow beat writers. The main question I get when I run into anybody at the combine this week was one, how does Chris Ballard still have a job? Two, how did they make an open competition at quarterback without the other quarterback even being on the roster? Like, how
Yeah.
bad is it in Indy for that to happen? And I was like,
Right?
you know what? Those are two hard hitting questions that will file away myself for a later date for sure.
No, I mean that's what I'm wondering too. And again, when we talked about, or I'm sorry, when Chris Ballard talked about Anthony Richardson, he didn't rave about it. He didn't say he's been having a great offseason. He didn't say he's been crushing it down there. He just said he's down there, he's working, and we trust the evaluations of the guys that are down there. Like we talk a lot about Chris Ballard. I think I led the podcast off of this saying he tends to leave breadcrumbs, right? He tends to provide hints as to what's coming. Maybe that's one interpretation of the way he handled the Anthony Richardson thing is that maybe he's getting the exit ramp ready. Like maybe that's what this is. I don't think it is. I truly don't. I mean, if in my heart of hearts, I think they're going to stick with Anthony Richardson for one more year. They're going to bring in somebody like a Daniel Jones or maybe a Jameis Winston or something like that, and hope Anthony Richardson wins that competition and ride with him as long as they possibly can. That's absolutely what I believe is going to happen. However, I don't want to just dismiss the possibility that they looked back on the season, watched what happened with him in the locker room, the tap out, all that stuff, and went, this guy's not a franchise quarterback. I could see it. It could happen. I think there are some franchises that might have made that decision. I don't think the Colts did, but I think there are some places that would have been like, this guy didn't have it.
Yeah, I think you made a huge point, a great point. And, you know, I do want to mention Shane did talk. He just didn't say much, like
Yeah.
normal. We asked about Anthony having competition. He said he thinks it's good for everybody. Typical coach speak, quite honestly.
Yeah.
There wasn't much to glean from that. But I thought that was the biggest takeaway from the combine on the Colts front is open competition at
Yep.
quarterback. How open is it? How realistic is it? Those sorts of things. And so I'll put a button on that topic. Now, the other things
Yeah.
that kind of jumped out to me from what Chris Ballard talked about, and we don't have to go as in depth, I mean, mainly because, as we know, nothing matters about the quarterback in this league. um, Few of the housekeeping items. I was intrigued by him mentioning, and this was organically, we asked about Lou Anarumo, and both Shane and Ballard mentioned multiple when it comes to his schemes. And I was like,
Yep.
okay, that to me told me that they wanted to undergo a fundamental change in their defense.
Mhm.
We don't want to just line it up and do the same old stuff that we did under Gus Bradley, the bend but don't break, a lot of zone, coverage, a lot of, easy completions underneath. We don't want to do that anymore. We want to be different. And I think different is the embodiment of Lou Anarumo because he's kind of a chameleon. We
Yep.
talked to our guy Ted Wynn here at The Athletic. I encourage you all to check out all of his film analysis and things like that, but he's always in the film. He told me, hey, this guy bends the game plans to whatever quarterback they're facing or running back, or this is how we take away this guy. I encourage you all to check out this video they did on Colts.com where Rick Venturi and Lou Anarumo kind of broke down, his chameleon-like style and taking away certain players that he's seen over the years. That to me was huge, Jim, and a very big indicator of like them wanting to sort of be a little more aggressive and less conservative on defense.
Yeah. Not static. Multiple. Move things around. Don't let defenses know what's coming. And again, like I think Gus Bradley and that style of defense gets kind of a bad rap. Like there is some merit to the idea of we're gonna do what we do, we'll do it really well, and we'll take away what you do well. I get that, I do, but they haven't been able to do it consistently. Whether that's been Gus Bradley's fault or the players' fault or Chris Ballard's fault. I think honestly, I think a lot of it falls on Chris Ballard not giving Gus Bradley the weapons he needs to execute the defense that he wants to run. However, I do think that they needed to change, and I've always preferred the multiple looks, the Bill Belichick type style of defense, which is we're going to adjust to what we think you don't do well. You need special kinds of players for that, and you've written about what kind that is. High IQ, athletic players who can do different kinds of things for you,
Yes.
depending on what the game plan calls for that week. So my interest is going to be to see, and again, Chris Ballard's not going to talk about this now, but I am very interested to see how how that's reflected in both his free agency spending and in the draft. Like, what type of players is he going to target on defense, and how is that going to be different from the types of players that he targeted in the past? Because let's say corners, say like he's targeted tall, long-armed corners. Speed has not been as big of a thing because they're going to play a lot of zone, right? So he doesn't need necessarily. Again, there's some makeup speed that you need. Obviously, fast corners are good, but that's not been a priority. But if you're going to play, are you going to have the chance or opportunity to play more man coverage? You're going to need guys with a little more speed. And again, if you're finding guys with a lot of speed and a lot of size, well, those are first round picks, right? Like those are the guys. Great
Yeah.
man coverage ability with great size and speed. Okay, now you're talking about first round picks. So how is that going to change his evaluation of what he's looking for in the mid rounds on defense? And that's just one position. Obviously, at safety, you've hit this hard. Like you need guys that are high IQ. You probably need a guy who can definitely play center field, but you want to be able to bring the guy in the box too if you need to, or
Exactly.
have him cover a tight end or running back out of the backfield. So it's going to call for some different things than what he had drafted for or signed in the past. So I'm very interested to see how Chris Ballard handles that going forward, because this is the first time he really hasn't had a defensive coordinator who runs a very static defense that is something he's accustomed to. Chris Ballard came up in the cover two. He had Matt Eberflus. Then he kind of moved into the cover two, cover three with Gus Bradley, and you could find similar players for that. This is different. This is different for the first time Chris Ballard's there.
Absolutely. And Shane mentioned, hey, this is why I brought Lou Anarumo in. Again, that was our first time talking to Shane, at least outside of his little statement that he gave when Lou was hired. Why did you pick him? Why did he stand out to you? And he said, this is the guy who gave me fits and kind of kept me up at night when it comes to schemes and different things that he would do and things that would kind of, be an extra chess move or chess piece that he just hadn't considered before. And so I think that is some significant praise from Shane Steichen, because I understand there were some questionable decisions as far as what offense was built around Anthony, at least early on last season. But this is a guy who's highly respected as a play caller in this league. And then you go back to a couple seasons ago. I know Philly won the championship this year, but when they went the first time, Shane Steichen's stock couldn't have been any higher with how that offense was humming. And so again, if you're saying that, if you're that guy saying, oh, this other guy gave me so many problems, I think that's a big part of why he was brought in. And now to your point, Jim, and this leads to my next point that I heard from Chris Ballard and kind of, perked my ears up. The free agency part, that is
Yeah.
to me like the most like ring the bell outside of Anthony Richardson in the quarterback position, which again, from what I've heard, internally and also what Ballard just told us on the record, Anthony is like, let's go, let's compete. I'm ready. I'm with it. So take that for what it's worth. It's not like he's like,
Yep.
upset or he's naive or he's, blind to the fact that he hasn't had the best start to his career. From everything that I hear, he's like, bring it on. And
Yeah.
obviously we will see. He has to prove himself just as much as he has to prove, this regime has to prove itself. But getting back to this part, I think that the free agency part will play a huge factor in Lou Anarumo's new defense, how you upgrade around Anthony Richardson on the margins. I'm not saying you go out and get, the top wide receiver. You have good talent there, but just do you go get a tight end in free agency, a veteran tight end? Do you go get some veteran offensive linemen for some depth? Whatever the case may be. And then obviously the whole point of free agency, at least this year, is do you get the big fish? Like, do you finally get the one, player or two that you look at them and you're like, you are coming in not as a depth piece, not as an insurance policy, but as someone who is going to fundamentally change our team and raise us up. And that to me is the question. Now, obviously, we've heard about Javon Holland, we heard about Justin Reed. There's other players out there that are free agents, and it's like every year, there's highs and lows in the free agency class, but there's good players out there. that you can go get. I mean, I went through my list of
Yeah.
possible free agents they should target, and that to me, can you close the deal? We know they were in on Daniil Hunter last year, Jim,
Yep.
and they had a chance to get him, and it just didn't work. Make it work. That's my thing. Like I don't think anybody, and feel free to chime in. I don't think anybody in Indianapolis would be satisfied if you say, "Oh, I tried," and like we were there. We're not trying to hit it this time around.
I think Chris Ballard said that. I think he did. I think he said we have to close the deal. Like they were in. We know they were in on Daniil Hunter. I think they were close, but it does. They didn't finish it off. They didn't get him, and that ended up being a huge thing because the ramifications of that are they signed Daniil Hunter. They probably don't draft Laiatu Latu. They probably go a different direction in the draft. And again, not saying that Latu's a bad player or anything. I'm just saying the dominoes are very interesting to see if they had finished that off in free agency this year. I'm curious. Honestly, I just want to throw it back to you. Like, what do you think? I heard what you heard. He seems serious about spending in free agency and
Yes,
closing the deal on some of these guys. I think it will happen. Do I think they're going to sign three big time names? No. I think my my thought is they're going to get one guy, one top of the market type of guy,
mm-hmm.
and then I'm curious. Are they going to just fill in? Do you think they'll sign a handful of helpful veterans? Do you think Chris Ballard's typically sat out the first wave or two of free agency, and he's usually got like, okay, I'll find some bargains on not day three, but like the third wave, whenever that really happens, is like, oh, this guy didn't get the market he thought he was
Right,
going to
right,
get. I'll
right.
swoop in and grab him. So what would be satisfying, I guess, maybe not to you or to Colts fans, is like assuming there's one big fish, a Javon Holland type, and then beyond that, I guess what would be satisfying, and what do you think? I know that's really hard to put into like,
Yeah,
oh, is it
but
a corner? Is it a linebacker? Is it an
yeah,
offensive lineman? But like, what? Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm curious. Is like, at what point would you be like, okay, yes, he fulfilled the promise that he made about free agency?
I think you go out and get one immediate starter, not
Okay,
somebody to compete for a starting spot. That dude comes in, he's a starter, and I think that's either a cornerback or safety. Pick one, but get it done. Obviously, in my mind, knowing what veteran safeties have meant to Lou Anarumo's defense, I probably lean more towards safety.
Mhm.
Sign someone, a defensive back that is a legit day one starter with his new team.
Yeah,
Secondly, like kind of like in my 10-step plan, go out and get another insurance policy, more depth at cornerback or safety. If you go
yes,
big on one of them, get another one. Don't have to go big again as far as price, but get someone who has a respectable resume, has played a ton, has production, whatever the case
yeah,
may be.
can
Go get
start.
them.
That would be
Yes,
fine.
because you need depth, and I
Right.
understand. You might feel very high on Sam Womack or very high on Jalen Jones, or you're optimistic Juju Brents can be whatever he wants to be. Nothing goes right in the NFL when you don't have contingency plans. Like the bottom line is, someone's going to get hurt, someone's going to get banged up. It's the NFL. Have more bodies in those positions, and then I think a coverage linebacker is huge. Like
Yeah,
if you want to be multiple, if you want, you know, the ability to kind of rush the passer and be a little more aggressive, your guys have to cover better. And I feel like there were too many times we got guys like Drew Lock looking like superstars because all they have to do is throw the ball across the middle of the field, and they know, oh, Zaire and EJ aren't really going to be that great in coverage. And Zaire's locked in; he's an All Pro. He's staying put. But EJ is going to turn 30 this year, I believe, and he's a free agent. I would get someone, in my opinion, who is more just rangier and he has a
yeah.
chance to cover better in a league where you're being asked to cover more because of how the offenses have evolved. So that to me is kind of like a dream free agency scenario. Now, again, that doesn't mean you don't go out and get a couple offensive line, whatever. If you want to spend some more money, that's fine. But the top to me, sign a big time defensive back, go get a linebacker, and go get a supplemental defensive back, whether you spent big at safety or cornerback. Then do the inverse basically and get a
Yeah.
cheaper, respectable version of that. And that to me is a realistic offseason or free agency haul for the Colts.
So looking at that, they got about right now about $35 million in cap, according to over the cap, which should be pretty accurate based on the fact that we have the official cap number, which is 279 million point two, if you guys really want to
Mm-hmm.
get specific. Um, so I wanted to ask you about the ways they could free up more money and what your read was on the Braden Smith, Samson
Oh
Ebukam
yes.
of it all, because I think they could still sign the quarterback, the safety, the corner, the linebacker. Honestly, with the money they have, if they're willing to push some of it into the future and still be okay.
Hmm.
Now, if you want to add re-signing Will Fries to that, or Dio, which I don't think you or I think is going to happen, but you're going to need to free up a little bit more money, I would think, to make those things happen. On sign your draft class and all that and all that. So, what did you think? We know cutting Braden Smith would free up. I think it's a little over $16 million. Signing cutting Samson Ebukam would free up, I think, around $7.5 million. What was your read on that? Because you did talk about both those players.
One, I was surprised about Sampson because that was organic. We came in and asked about Braden Smith, which I will get into, but Sampson wasn't really high on my priority list of players to ask about. But he brought him up organically, talking about Lou Anarumo's defense and players he's excited to see in that system. And I was like, huh? Wait a second. The guy who's going to turn 30 in May and coming off a left Achilles tear? Yeah, that Samson Ebukam. And Ballard was saying he looks forward to getting him back in the mix. And so it sounds like at least they're more willing to do that or bring him back than not. And perhaps that's because you're not might not be able to keep Dio Dangbo most likely in free agency, or perhaps you're not going to draft a defensive end super high, so you're just kind of thinking of depth pieces. But I was a little bit surprised by that, Jim, that he was that like optimistic about Samson Ebukam, and I get it. Maybe part of the reason you're optimistic is he tore his Achilles, during training camp. He's been a lot
Yeah,
more. He's a lot further along probably in his rehab than if he had torn it, in week 12, whatever. But as we've always talked about, you look at athletes, man, almost that second year is the one where they feel better. Not the first year after the surgery. You're like medically cleared and you're full go, but you're not yourself. At least in my opinion, it's that second year. I've seen it with Julian Blackman. I've seen it with Dallas Flowers. I think he probably needed more time, and so I'm just hesitant to bank on someone who's that old, plays that position, and is coming off an Achilles tear. Yeah, that was. Yeah, he said Sampson's been doing great work in terms of rehab and coming back. It'll be fun to watch how he uses Latu. This is talking about Lou. If you're able to move a lot, move those two around and be creative with them, it'll be fun. And I'm like, okay, like he's talking like that's going to be like your, one of your starting defensive ends, and maybe Quiddy Pay is one of your reserves. So that to me, again, surprising. Braden Smith, I read this as two things, and he didn't disclose what was going on personally. He kind of just said, hey, he's still going through some stuff, but he wants to play football. Didn't say in Indianapolis. So I think this is one of two things, Jim. We are going to cut you because you have the fourth highest cap hit on the team, and you're no
mhm.
longer worth that money. Or two, we're open to restructuring a deal and keeping you around for another year.
I think it was, yeah. The way he reacted at first, it felt like to me like it's over. But I think when you talked to him a little bit later, you said it sounded like, okay, it's over unless he's really willing to take a significant pay cut, which I think, to be honest with you, I'm not opposed to.
Oh
Depending on
no,
where he is
no,
health wise, um, having good offensive linemen is always a good idea. And if you can pencil him in as your right tackle, and I say pencil on purpose because you might have to erase it real quick and then slide
right.
in Gonzalez. But I think that's, I mean, I'm fine with that. You keep Braden Smith at a cheaper rate, make him your right tackle, and hope for the best. Hope he rebounds
Mm-hmm.
off of whatever happened last year. That's fine. It can't be at $20 million cap hit. It can't be. And again, it can't cost you. Keeping Braden Smith can't be the reason you don't go get the free agents that you need to go get. Like that cannot be the reason that happens. So I
No,
think you I think you have to be and I think Ballard's going to have a very serious conversation with him and his agent and say, like, this is the number. If that's okay, great. If it's not, see ya. Like, that's what I think is going to end up happening.
there you go. And so to kind of go back to, or at least pivot to more draft related things,
Yeah.
because we are at the NFL scouting combine, which to me, it almost feels like if you're in our position as reporters, unless you actually cover the draft like Dane Bruler or Daniel Jeremiah, and shout out to Dane because he's just amazing. I joke with him all the time. I was like, the combine is like the bat signal. Like you come out of the cave, and it's like we know we got our our top guy on the boots on the ground, and he still has time to do like write feature stories about different prospects. So shout out to freaking Dane, man. That's a true journalist right there. But all that to say, um, I think with the draft in general, it was good to hear what Chris Ballard thought of the strengths of the draft. And he usually is pretty revealing with that every year. And when I asked him that to kind of end off the little podium stand, he said, you know, D line, tight ends, the offensive line, talking about offensive line depth. He mentioned secondary. And so to me, I was like, yeah, this sounds like secondary, tight end, those two, we'll get more into tight ends, kind of wrap this thing up. But those two feel like the biggest gaps to me within this team. Like the biggest positional holes is tight end, defensive back, or safety. And then, of course, I'm reading this and I'm listening to him. I'm like, oh, there's that line, D line and O line. I do think that they'll invest in the offensive line. They probably should in the mid rounds because even if you do bring back Braden Smith or you do bring Will Fries, you still want to have a little more depth behind them. In addition to Matt Gonzalez,
For
you can
sure.
never have enough offensive linemen, especially when you know inevitably somebody's going to go down. Like you can never have enough offensive linemen, and every time you think you do, you don't. That's just kind of my opinion on the matter.
Agreed.
So I think that was a little, perhaps revealing of how they're thinking, and then marrying that with what others have said. I know that Dane Brugler was saying that tight end is a really deep draft class this year, and defensive back is a really deep draft class this year. And so I would expect the Colts to kind of act accordingly with that to help this team get better on the margins. And that's the part that's so mind-boggling to me. Like they've won 8 games 3 of the last 4 years. Not my stat. That's shout out to Matt Taylor, Colts. He's awesome. But so you're right. Yeah, I in a sense I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like you're kind of close. I don't think you're that close to like really winning anything of significance. But in a division that's up for grab every year, if you could just get better on the margins in the draft and free agency, that would change so much. And so, the thing I wanted to ask you, Jim, what about these tight ends, man? Like that
Hmm.
is, I didn't meet with a lot of players this week. I had a chance to talk to some of the DBs as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, everyone's over there for the quarterbacks and whatnot. I myself wasn't, but I'm reading Twitter and seeing everybody's responses and quotes and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, had the Colts had a top 5 pick, I'd have been over there in that scrum too. It's just, let the other people, handle their business. But all that to say, Jim, what do you think about when Dane says this draft class is deep at tight end? Does that make you think, okay, you don't have to take a tight end in the first round? Like, because that's what it feels like. A lot of the mock drafts is like we're mocking Tyler Warren to the Colts, but if he isn't there and there's some depth there, what's your thinking if you had to put the GM hat on?
Yeah, I mean, when you say it like that, it definitely makes you think, okay, maybe you can wait till the second or third round. But here's the thing, like the Colts have kind of done that. They've done the second,
I
third,
like
fourth
that. Yeah,
round
good point. Good
tight
point.
end thing,
Good
and it
point.
just hasn't quite worked out. And I do think, again, if you want to be the type of offense that I think that again, you could probably sick of hearing me say this, but the Eagles type offense, like if that's what you want, then you need a guy like Dallas Goedert, who by the way was taken in the second round when they already had a tight end on the roster in Zach Ertz.
Mm-hmm.
Can't everybody build like the Eagles? Wouldn't that be nice? But I don't think you can skimp at it, and I don't think the free agent targets are all that appealing. Like you can add a guy who is useful, don't get me wrong, and can help, but if you want to significantly upgrade it, if you want to help Shane Steichen, if you want to help Anthony Richardson, I do think you need to be pretty serious about who you take, and if that's going to be Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland, I those are the guys who are going to make a quicker impact. Now, are they going to be Brock Bowers? No, like that's not going to happen. I don't think the Brock Bowers thing seems like a once in a generation type of situation with where you end up setting the rookie record as a tight end for catches. It's nuts. So, but I do think that. So, like the way I read it was, yes, it's deep at those positions. So it would be good if you can grab one later. That's fine. I mean, some really talented players have been drafted in the second round recently. Sam
Right.
Laporta was a second round pick by the Lions. That was a huge hit for them.
Right.
But if the DBs are deep and the offensive line's deep, maybe you get your tight end in the first round and then draft those guys later. Maybe he was setting up a trade back scenario. Hey, it's deep in the middle rounds. I'm going to collect some more middle round picks.
Yeah.
I can really bolster the depth of the team that way. But it's hard for me. Again, I understand the positional value thing at tight end. You really, if you're going to do it in the first round, you really got to be right about it. Like you got to be right, especially in the top half of the first round.
Yes.
But from what I keep reading and hearing, Warren and Colson Loveland have a very good chance of making you right.
There you go. And that kind of leads me to our little final section here of this pod is when I talk to Dane Brugler, and I'm doing a story on this early for next week, so keep an eye out for that. It'll be exciting, I promise. I'll put my love into it once I get a little more sleep, getting used to the new schedule. But talking to him, and not just him, but other people around the draft analysts. If you listen to Daniel Jeremiah, another guy who I think is phenomenal, there isn't that big of a gap between Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. Had a chance to talk to them both the other day, and I thought it was hilarious that Colston Loveland is telling us that he was did rodeo when he was a kid, and I'm like, okay, like that'll get the tough guy juices flowing for sure. Um, and actually, Jim, he's like when you're in the game and you have that one big play you got to make. It's kind of like you get one ride on a bull or something like that. And I was like, people will love you in Indianapolis if you come here and you play with that mentality. And then you also have Tyler Warren, who's like, again, more of I think is a more traditional tight end. A little bit older, 22. I think Colston Loveland is 20. Perhaps he's a bit more of the hot commodity just because of the incredible season he had at Penn State. Michigan didn't have a great quarterback. They couldn't throw the ball forward. It looked like in some games. So, but to Tyler Warren, he's a guy who worked his way up. Kind of blue collar mentality. And then on top of that, I thought this was hilarious. Looking at, he said, I wore number 44 because when I was younger, my dad, put on John Riggins film and said, this is how we want you to run the ball. And for those in the older crowd, I know I'm young, but John Riggins, I'm looking him up. I'm like, who the heck is John Riggins? John Riggins was a fullback, and we don't even have those anymore. It seems like,
Yeah.
and he would run that rock. And if you watch his like highlights and stuff, like the dude, like it's funny to see him run because it's so like old school, big shoulder pads and bruising style. And that's kind of what they want, lumbering guy, and that's kind of what Tyler Warren was alluding to. So, from what I heard, it sounds like it's a preference thing for what the Colts should sort of target. What kind of lines up with their needs versus, do you take a tight end that high? Yeah, you take them that high if you think it's going to help your team get better. And obviously, we know that's a huge hole for this offense. And so, at the end of the day, though, and we've talked about this so much, Jim, I think you have to help Anthony with that first pick. I don't care
I
if
agree.
it's tight end. I don't care if it's offensive line. Hell, I mean, if there's a wide receiver, that drop. I mean, whatever. Do something to help Anthony on that side because ultimately, to me, Jim, and feel free to weigh in. As much as we talk about Rumo and Javon Holland, and the safeties and the cornerbacks, if you get Anthony Richardson to look like just to me a starter, if you get him to look
Yeah.
like a starter and he's out there and he's not turning the ball over a ton, and let's say you do, I mean that's what we're here for. You're trying to win the division. You win the division. They do that, or even if they don't win the division, sore spot for Colts fans. But if Anthony Richardson takes a significant step forward, everything else I think is forgivable. Almost. Like I'm not saying I would personally forgive them, but I think that everyone would kind of be like, you know what? At least you finally got the quarterback right.
Yeah.
And that's what it's
It
all, I mean, that's what it comes down to this season.
it's the thing that will save all their jobs, undoubtedly. They could go 7-10, but if Anthony Richardson looks like a surefire starter, like you're going into year 4, he's your starter, I think they keep their jobs, like everybody, because they're like, oh, we got something to build on here. So I am 100% with you. We can't lose sight of this. And I think that was the first thing I said in the offseason podcast that we did, which was like, use free agency to do what you need to do on defense, address the things for Lou Anarumo. But the draft has got to be about adding like pillars around Anthony Richardson. And the draft might not shake out the way that you hope. Like maybe all those guys that you want are gone. I understand that. You can't just force a pick, but like I'm with you, man. Like I want to keep this thing focused on being as effective of a running game as you can be so that you take as much pressure off Anthony Richardson as you can. Now, maybe you draft a tight end who helps in the ground game, is a decent blocker, and can take pressure off of him by being a good after the catch guy, a good over the middle target, that kind of stuff too. Just make sure this season you're spending your resources, assuming that, based on our earlier conversation, Richardson's still your guy.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you're spending this offseason making his life as easy as possible. I think you're right. I think it all comes back to that, is make Anthony Richardson's life as easy as possible. Put the kid gloves back on, run a training wheels type offense. I'll use all these stupid analogies and make it as easy on him as you can, because you need him to succeed for you to keep your jobs and for the Colts to be good.
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, it doesn't even feel like it's year three. I'm like, wow, it went by so fast, mainly because we just haven't seen him play. I mean, he's played 15 games and through his first two seasons. And I'm like, wow, that is such a small sample size still. And so there's other things I'll get into later on when it comes to, I know Anthony's been doing some VR training.
Yep.
And I know, you talked about not making things harder on Anthony. Does it make it harder to have an open competition where you got to split reps in theory? Is that something that's going to help him when he needs more reps, needs more time on task, or are
Yeah.
they talking about more game reps? Quite frankly, because even last year, Jim, I get so many questions. People they're like, "Man, you didn't see like the inaccuracies and erratic, throws and stuff coming." Like, yeah, in theory, I did. If you go back and read Dane Brugler's summary of Anthony and the Beast from 2 years ago, it is spot on. You know, vertical offense, big play threat, but volatile passer, big
Yeah.
time athlete, can be inaccurate. Like that's sort of the gist of what he said. But to me, I look at him and I'm like, man, this might be it. This should be it. I don't know how many quarterbacks will get a longer leash than these 3 years if they're not performing. And I know I asked some tough questions, passive aggressive questions to Chris Ballard, but one of them that I had, Jim, was where does the injury stuff factor into all of this? I mean, you kind of let off with that, like the availability part. If you go back and read Chris Ballard's, transcript from when the season ended,
Yep.
the first thing he hit on was just he's not been available beyond the, maturity he's got to, increase and, accuracy it's the availability too. And I just wonder, Jim, like, how do you weigh injury prone versus bad luck? I asked Chris Ballard that, and he said, if I knew that, I'd be the richest guy in the world, like something along those lines. And that's where I'm at. Like, even if all that works, you're asking for so many things to happen. Like, and this is just me being God honest truth. And I would tell Anthony this myself, not in a rude way, but just in an honest way. You're asking him to do things he's never done before, which is, and to me, it's really two big things: stay healthy and be accurate.
Yeah.
If you go back through his high school career, through his college career, he's always had some injuries. He hasn't really played a ton of football, period. And then two, he hasn't been obviously the best thrower. So, yeah, I'm curious to see how things work down there in Florida with Chris Hess and working with Josh Allen. And obviously that'll be a huge story for all of us to ask about. Hey, how was it? And
Yep.
then if it works, maybe like Bill's Mafia does, they donate to different charities. The Colts Nation can donate to their charity.
Yeah,
Say
that
thank you
would
for
be
saving my franchise.
very appropriate if
Um,
it turns out that way.
exactly. And if it doesn't work out, then maybe you bring the pitchforks out and you say, Josh Allen, you contact the league for tampering.
Saboteur. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I'm happy to report, Jim, as we get out of here. I did not get into any, squabbles or fights at the NFL
You
scouting
didn't fight
combine.
anybody at a Starbucks? No, you
I
didn't
did
shove
not.
anyone?
No, no. I was at the Starbucks with the Ian Rappaport and Jordan Schultz incident. A little bit before that popped off, I was gone. I was not around for that kerfuffle. Is the
I
word I'll
missed it by a
use.
few hours, man. I
I
I took
mean,
off. I got on the road. Like I was in that Starbucks, man. I think a couple hours before it happened. So
I
I'm
know
I'm
it's
I'm, I'm mad.
it's
Yeah.
so funny because everyone keeps saying it. It's like the scene of a crime. Like I was just
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I should go back and like take a
Everyone was just
picture.
there.
And
It's
and
where
one of my
everyone's. It's where everyone
yeah,
goes.
one of my
Yeah.
buddies knows that for Halloween, was it last year, year before, I was a referee, and I have a legitimate referee shirt. And he was like, "You
Oh
should just
man,
go there with your whistle and take a picture." And I was like, I got to be a little professional with the athletic. But man, I was
that
like,
would be very funny.
look, if I had Starbucks money, I probably would have been over there, having a little fun with that. But yeah, it was good. It's been a good week. It's been a great week. I hope all of you all who might be traveling, to Indianapolis or just, if you're local and you're going down there with your kids to do a bunch of games and stuff like that and use some of the activations they have, enjoy yourselves. And really, I think, embrace this because I do, I'm standing on my soapbox now, Jim. I would love for the combine to stay in Indianapolis. Talk to Chris Gall from Visit Indy the other day. Great human being. Weather's great. The gods I feel like are just on our side right now. The football gods when it comes to the weather, the atmosphere, and obviously we'll keep a close eye on what comes out of the combine as far as times, testings, relative athletic scores for those out there nerding like me. That RAS score is always kind of useful, Jim, when it comes to the Colts. And so
Oh
I'm
yeah.
excited about that for sure. And you got any plans for the weekend, or you just, kicking your feet up a little bit after being in my part of the, woods for a little while?
No, we are. It's my 2-year-old's birthday today. She turns 2 today. So today we're
Oh,
gonna we
happy
do some.
birthday! You gotta
Thank you very
lead with
much.
that,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. We're celebrating the birthday today, and then a little bit with the family this weekend. So yeah, it should be a blast.
Sounds good. What's her name?
Lila.
There you go. You got to tell people, man. I'm like, I know. You got to tell the people. So, happy birthday to Lila. I guess we'll end it on that, and we will talk to you all next time.